James Davis.
Hello, listener, and thank you so much for joining us on the Teaching Abroad pod, coming at you on August 11th. I am your host, James Davis. Happy to be back behind the mic, and with me this week will be one of our regular co-hosts, Alex Yealand, from the Oxford Seminars Job Placement Service. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Seminars, and if you're looking to teach overseas or online, check out our new and improved 120-hour TESOL, TESOL, TEFL course, complete with access to the unrivaled job placement service. Go to oxfordseminars.com today for more details. And with that, welcome to episode 9 of the Teaching Abroad pod, where we discuss all things TESOL, from travel adventure stories and food recommendations to teaching tips and job search advice. We'll be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks, so be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere. On today's show, we have a great guest. We will be talking about what it's like to live and teach in Japan with one of the job placement service members at Oxford Seminars, LaPlante. Luke spent over 10 years teaching in Japan, and he's now working alongside Alex and Rowan in the job placement department to help graduates of our course find work in Japan and elsewhere. And if you listen right to the end after the interview with Luke, you will hear a JPS update specifically about Japan, what's going on there right now with COVID and what type of positions are available now and in the future. But before we dive into that interview with Luke, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Alex. Alex, how's it going?
Doing well, James. How are you doing?
I am doing very, very well indeed. As you can see, I'm in my new house.
Yeah. How are you liking it so far?
It's fun, but stressful. And I do miss my giant Buddha painting as the background. I've got my daytime TV sofa set up at the moment, but we'll figure it out. We'll get something a bit cooler for future episodes, I hope. So what's new with you?
Well, not too much. We're working away, looking at overseas jobs in different countries. Each country is sort of doing a slightly different version of COVID restrictions. Some are more open than others, but there are still quite a few job opportunities available internationally. So that's good. And I'm sure you've been pretty busy with the move-in, but since we are going to talk about Japan this week, have you had a chance to watch any of the Olympics so far?
Oh, yes. It's been good. I really was not excited before the Olympics started. I don't know, I guess because there was kind of, rightly so, concern and a little bit of negativity from, Japan itself about having the Olympics, so wasn't too excited. I've kind of not been following the athletes leading up to the Olympics. In 2012 when it was in London, I was obsessed. I knew everything, and my whole day was scheduled around watching the Olympics. But once it started, it's been really good. Sorry to our US listeners, but the women's soccer, that was a great moment for Canada. Getting to the final, and there's just been so many great moments. But I think the best thing is that Japan has had so many gold medals and has kind of lifted the mood in a country that has been pretty hit hard by COVID. And it's just been a cool Olympics. It's really fun to see skateboarding. And maybe people haven't heard of her, but there was a 13-year-old from Great Britain who won a bronze medal in skateboarding. She's our youngest ever medalist. It just blows my mind that the combined age of all 3 medalists in the skateboarding, in the women's park skateboarding, I believe, could be street, was 41. So just insane, some of the things that we're seeing in this Olympics. So I hope they keep up the skateboarding and things like that. How about you?
So
Have you seen much?
I really haven't seen much. I've heard a little bit about it. I heard about there was one track runner who I guess fell and then she was able to get up and still win the race. I'm not sure which distance that was.
Yeah, they there's been a lot of good stories coming out of this Olympics. They've had a lot of they're nearly on track for like the most world records for like quite a few Olympics since the Montreal Olympics. Um, so it's been good. I think it's what people needed. It's a nice distraction, with the looming Delta variant or not so looming Delta variant in some areas. So yeah, I've really enjoyed the Olympics, and I just feel bad that Japan's done such a great job hosting it that they don't get to enjoy it fully. But they're making the best of it for sure.
And is the Summer Olympics usually your favorite, or are you Winter Olympics, or a bit of both?
Oh, I'm 100% Summer Olympics. So, and it's kind of it sounds almost nationalistic, but like Great Britain does not really feature in the Winter Olympics. Like maybe we get a curling medal, maybe. But the Summer Olympics, we got second in the medal table last time in Rio. So it's just a lot more, there's a lot more to cheer for, I guess. So yeah, I'm way more hyped for the Summer Olympics.
Well, hopefully Luke's been watching a little bit and we can chat with him since he's our resident Japan expert for the show.
Yes, we can maybe pick his brain about judo.
Yeah.
All right. Before we do go to that interview with Luke, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsor. With Oxford Seminars, starting your new career teaching ESL couldn't be easier. Oxford Seminars has trained more than 70,000 teachers over the past 20 years, and you could be next. Their comprehensive 120-hour program starts with live instruction from an experienced ESL teacher, followed by convenient online modules. If your goal is to relocate overseas or even teach from the comfort of your own home, Oxford Seminars' renowned lifetime job placement service will get you where you want to be. Call 1-800-779-1779 by August 13th and give the code POD811 to get $50 off your Oxford Seminars TESOL course price when paying in full. If you're too late, don't worry, there'll be another code in the next episode. Now back to the show. Okay, we are now joined by Lucas LaPlante. Luke taught in Japan for a total of 11 years, mostly with the JET program. From 2005 to 2008, Luke was living and working in Beppu City and Oita City. And then from 2013 to 2021, he worked in Miyakojima, Okinawa, Kita-Kyushu, Fukuoka. Yep. During his time teaching in Japan, Luke taught everyone from kindergarteners to retirees in both public and private school systems. He's currently, though, a job placement advisor with Oxford Seminars. Luke, welcome to the podcast, and I'm sorry for any animal interruptions.
Quite all right. Thanks for having me.
So, before we get into teaching and all that exciting stuff, how have you been enjoying the Olympics?
Well, I haven't really followed it a ton. I kind of followed it more on the news than I do on TV. But it seems like Japan's doing okay.
It seems like the gold medals are kind of helping lighten the mood within the country where, perhaps there is a different perspective there, but the Western media seem to be covering the Tokyo Games from the perspective that people really were not happy that they were going ahead.
That was my understanding. It was probably as much as 75%, I think, of Japanese were in favor of postponing it, just given the circumstances. And I understand that.
Yeah. But a few gold medals, and now everything is looking much brighter. So that's good. I guess you're probably more into the Winter Olympics.
Slightly, but I'm a terrible Canadian. I don't really do any winter sports, so less so than most, I suppose.
Fair enough.
All right, so let's dive into the teaching. Luke, how did you decide to teach in Japan? Was it always a country that you've been fascinated with, or were there other factors that drew you there in the beginning?
Oh yeah. Well, my Japan was always my first choice because I took martial arts since I was a child. I never really got into the team sports. My father tried to get me into soccer and basketball, and they never took. But then I started taking judo, and I found I really liked it. So I took judo and I took aikido and karate in university, and it just introduced me to Japanese culture. And because of that, I just became really interested and keen on seeing it someday. And then when I heard about the JET program in university, because a friend of mine had done it, I was determined to get in.
And what types of schools did you work at in Japan? Did you work at different types of centers?
Yeah, I had a few different placements because I'm actually like a two-time jet, like you said in the intro. So the first time I was in Oita, and I was based at a senior high school, and they had me kind of leased out to a junior high school once a week, and that would change every couple of months. And then once a month, they would send me to a special needs school. And then actually my situation in Okinawa was completely different. So there I was just junior high school, and I was doing not one, not two, but six at one time. No, 6 or 7 different junior high schools on Miyakojima. So basically like half of their junior high schools, I would just go to a different one every day. And it was a good experience.
During my time teaching overseas, I never worked in the public school system myself. I was always at private language schools. But from friends that worked in the public school system, often one of the biggest challenges or the biggest rewards was having a co-teacher. So how does that work with the JET program?
So JET is based around team teaching. And so you are supposed to be always partnered with a Japanese teacher of English. Although in practice, sometimes that doesn't happen. So they're really good about following the rules and like making sure someone is there to support you, because they're supposed to be like teaching the kids the grammar, and then your job is to sort of make it fun and have activities that the children can participate in to consolidate what they've learned. So that was the case for probably about 95% of what I did. But then sometimes like the teacher is sick and they'll ask you to just step in and do the class, and you're not technically supposed to, but I did anyway.
Nice. So do you have any particular co-workers that like stand out in your memory as being like particularly excellent or memorable?
Yeah, of course. Like I worked with tons and tons of different teachers, and a lot of them were amazing. Some of them actually became good friends of mine. My friend Aya was one of the amazing teachers I worked with on Miyakojima. She spoke English and Spanish, and she was just like incredibly nice person. So yeah, we're still in touch, and there's lots of really, really good teachers that they know exactly how to manage the class, which makes the job of the ALT so much easier. When like you're not really dealing with discipline, you're sort of just focusing on teaching English. It lets you do your job.
Nice.
What about locations? Did you have a favorite location? Was Okinawa up there on the top of your list?
Oh, Okinawa is like by far the top of the list. It's like paradise. It's a beautiful place. And when I got that selection, that was my first pick the second time I did JET. I was thrilled. It felt like I won the lottery. And living in Miyako, which is like a popular tourist destination, there's so much to do. And even though it was a smaller island, like I was never bored. And I stayed the full 5 years that they allow. I would have stayed longer if they let me.
Is that a 5-year limit on the JET program?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was 3 years originally. They extended it in my last year that I was in Oita, but I didn't take advantage of that. But the second time, yeah, it was available up to 5 years, and it was nice because they would give you a little bump in pay every extra year that you stayed. They value your experience, and so yeah, I took advantage of that.
The idea of being like a two-time JET teacher, is that common?
No,
Okay.
they actually did a little poll in the orientation the second time that I was there in Tokyo, and I think out of about 2,000 or 3,000 people in this conference room that I was sitting in, they had people raise their hands who had done JET previously, and I think it was myself and probably about 4 other people.
Wow. which is surprising given that it's such a, renowned program, and it's very competitive. So you think that more people would look to go back like you did.
Yeah, people do, but you have to wait 5 years in between. And I guess a lot of
Oh,
people,
wow.
they start another career in the meantime, and they're just not free to go. But it just worked out that I was leaving a job just as that 5-year window was opening up, and the timing was just perfect. So I decided to reapply. And actually, when I went to Miyako, there was another second-term teacher teaching there at the same time as me.
Nice.
And how did you find the students in Japan? Are they sort of quiet and reserved, or are they boisterous and rowdy?
It depends on the age, I guess. Like little kids, universally, they're always crazy and super fun to work with. But once they get a little bit older, like to senior high school level, they get a little bit more shy and like socially conscious. And I think that's similarly true in most places.
So did you have any tips and tricks to get them speaking English in the classroom or participating more?
My favorites were using fun activities that they wanted to be engaged in. So they're not just like sitting there bored and being passively fed information, and they have to like interact. I use a lot of music to try and get them engaged, stuff that they would listen to. And humor. I just tried to like make them laugh. And once you make them laugh, they lighten up and they get into the lesson more.
How about your retirees? How do you get them motivated in the classroom?
Oh, they're self-motivated. They're there because they want to be there. I really enjoy teaching them because like the kids have to be there. And a lot of the time they will participate, but they may not always want to. But the retirees, they're like keen on learning English and they're ready to learn. So when they show up, you can pretty much, give them any topic and they'll be willing to talk about it.
Nice. And so they're doing this just for pleasure, just like a hobby, basically.
Yeah. So this was at an eikaiwa, like an after school kind of English language learning center. And I was teaching the older retirees for about, I'd say 2 years or so. They would come in the early afternoons before all the kids would arrive. And they were always like one of my favorite classes to teach.
So would it be more conversational, like the nature of those lessons?
Yeah, we would basically pick a topic. I had some worksheets that we would work through about often like a newspaper article. And so we would just sort of read through it together. I would answer any questions they would have. We would have a few questions about the material to sort of test their comprehension. And just discuss it for a while, and that was it. And a lot of the time we would do that, and then kind of go off on a tangent and just discuss whatever topic we felt like discussing.
Sounds so liberating. Like coming from teaching kids where you have to be very structured, and I did a bit of business English teaching with adults where the whole focus is about helping them get a better job. So it just sounds very freeing just to go into a classroom and just kind of not have that same kind of expectation. You can just, you still have to do a good job as a teacher, but you can let it go where it wants to go, which must be nice.
There's definitely planning involved in
Yeah.
both, but I think with the kids it requires much more structure and much more planning. With adults, they just want to practice, and any kind of practice that you can offer them is generally, great for them.
Yeah, and not to fixate on the retirees too much, but it is very interesting to me. Is that something that you did from the start? Is that something you kind of got into later during your time in Japan?
Well, it wasn't something I did through JET. They
Okay.
always have you in elementary, junior high school, or senior high school. So the retirees I started teaching because I had finished JET the second time, and I'd taken a job at a private school, and they had adult classes there. So initially it wasn't actually my class, it was being taught by someone else, but then our schedule got shifted around and they got traded to me, and it ended up being one of my favorite things in Japan.
Okay, so we're down to our favorite topics now. We've got food, we've got travel, and we've got money. So let's start with the money. Japan is known for having pretty competitive salaries and benefits. How did you find it living and working there? Were you able to save a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, JET, it's sort of the gold standard for the salary. It's the most you're probably going to get teaching English abroad. And I felt like, I was pretty much paid well for what I did. I tried to earn it, like I tried to justify that salary by working really hard there. But yeah, that in general, like Japan, I think is a good place to save money, even though the cost of living are high. Like they give you a very fair salary that's comparable to like all the other teachers that work around you. Yeah, I was able to save a bit, but I did a lot of traveling, so it kind of reduced the amount I was able to save.
That's fair. Yeah, that's something from like a customer service perspective. You know, when people are thinking about taking our course and going overseas, trying to help them understand that salary versus cost of living, because you know, Japan, on the face of it, the salary is very attractive. However, you know, everything is quite expensive. So when you are traveling, I guess that's when you're seeing the real benefit. That's where your money's going quite a long way, I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, I went to Thailand. The money that I saved in Japan took me very far in Thailand. It's definitely a great place if you're a teacher and you're teaching in Asia and you want to go and make your dollar go far. That's a good choice. But if you have bills at home, I mean, that's a big consideration. If you want to go to a country where you can make sure those bills get paid, you have to go somewhere, you know, where the salary is going to give you enough that you can pay your bills in America or Canada or wherever you're from.
And you did a lot of traveling within Japan as well?
Yep, basically everywhere between where I was living in the south in Kyushu up to Tokyo. I tried to see as many cities as I could. So Kobe and Osaka and Hiroshima and all those places I got to eventually. And there's a nice Shinkansen line that goes right from where I was straight up to Tokyo. So it was super fast.
And so we've covered, well, actually, no, we haven't. Thailand. So you got pretty far. Whereabouts did you go in Thailand?
Well, the first time, actually, when I arrived in Beppu, there was a group of other teachers who had been there before me, and they had set up a trip to Thailand, like a package deal that they had put together. And someone had dropped out, and they needed someone to come in and be their fourth. So I agreed to go, and it was just this really incredible sort of like guided tour package. So they took us around from Bangkok to the southern tail of Thailand. I think we went to Ao Nang and Khao Sok National Park, which I'd recommend to anyone. They're amazing. And we just got to do a lot of really interesting things. Like they took us riding on the back of elephants through a rubber plantation and swimming in a river in the jungle. I got a tattoo done by traditional means, tapped into your skin with bamboo. Yeah, it was a good adventure.
I feel like this question, although I'm asking it, it's very much in the spirit of Rowan, sometimes co-host. Did you drink a bucket of alcohol while in Thailand?
A bucket? Specifically yes. A bucket?
Specifically out of a bucket. I feel this is like one of Rowan's favorite things about Thailand.
I don't know, that I guess it's not as common as Rowan might think it is, because it didn't come up with me and I've been there twice.
Well, we will let him know. We'll pass on the message.
Yeah, I'm sure we drank the equivalent of a bucket while we were there.
No doubt.
Speaking of drinking, what about in Japan? What are the popular beverages, adult beverages there?
Okay, well, Okinawa has its own beer brand, essentially, Orion. That was the big go-to there. Let's see, Asahi, Kirin are all really good beers if you like beer. They have lovely whiskeys if you're a whiskey person, but I'm not, so I couldn't tell you which is good.
And what about food-wise? Any highlights from Japan? I know it's probably all highlights.
Yeah, there's so many good foods in Japan. I don't know where to begin. Like, I'm a sushi fan, so obviously I was in paradise there, and you can find amazing sushi pretty much anywhere. Ramen is really good. I was down the street from an amazing ramen shop in my last place that I lived there, and that was a treat. I would gift myself like every Sunday. There's so many good things like yakiniku, like fried Korean barbecue. Yeah, those are great. Anytime I would go for that.
On the other end of the scale, did you get into any of the weird and wonderful, like the raw chicken or anything like that?
Yes, funny you mention that. Actually, I got served raw chicken. I think it was like my third week in Japan, and it did weird me out a little bit. I was like, "Is this going to kill me?" But you want to be polite, and so you just kind of go along with it. If everyone else is doing it, you figure it's okay. And no, it didn't kill me, so I guess it's all right. I've had horse meat. I've had whale. Um, it's difficult to be a vegetarian in Japan. I'll just put that out there. There's always going to be people who are like, they just don't understand the concept of vegetarianism at all. Like even in a quote vegetarian meal, there's often going to be like bits of fish or something like that because they just don't understand. It has to be 100% like animal product free. Yeah, I think there's options for most people though. And it's a very healthy diet, which I appreciated. I didn't really like gain a lot of weight in Japan, which I, by all rights, I should have because people were constantly feeding me things, but they were healthy things mostly.
I know when I was in Taiwan, I spent a lot of time eating and drinking out of the 7-Elevens there. Is Japan similar? Is there a lot of convenience store shopping?
Well, 7-Eleven specifically, yes, but there's also Family Mart and what's the other one? There was Coco, but I think they went out of business. There's at least probably about 5 or 6 convenience store chains. They're kind of sprinkled around, and they all have pretty good food selections actually. Like you can get a bento, like a boxed lunch, and they're pretty cheap and well balanced, and it's like good for a quick meal.
Yeah, that was one of the wild things. My co-teachers, I was teaching in Korea, they would visit Japan and they would bring back 7-Eleven food for their friends from Japan.
Okay.
Like these cream buns and all sorts of like wild and wonderful stuff. Also Kit Kats, a lot of Kit Kats were brought back. So, but I never actually got there myself, which is like a big regret. If there was someone in a different country who's looking to travel to Japan just for a visit, what would you recommend? What is the one spot that they should go to?
In terms of tourist destination?
Yeah.
Well, I will always promote Miyakojima. For me, that was the best part of Japan. They have their own unique culture in Okinawa. So you can kind of see the Japanese culture that's there now, as well as like it's sort of counterposed with this Ryukyu culture that was there before. And the blend of the two was just really magical, I guess, or fascinating for me. I just really enjoyed it there. And the people are so friendly. Like the attitude there, it's like this totally different world, this island culture. They're much more laid back. They're very like friendly and relaxed. And it's sort of like the Hawaii of Japan.
Nice. And I guess on the flip side, if someone's thinking about going over there to teach, where should they go?
Well, teaching jobs kind of vary quite a bit when you go prefecture to prefecture. They have their own standards and different schools and different organizations that are unique to each prefecture. Some are like nationwide, like you hear about Aeon. They're a big company that does a lot of ALT teaching privately, and a lot of people work for them, and they generally seem to enjoy it. There's a trend, though, in certain places, like where I was in Fukuoka with dispatch companies. That's becoming a thing now in Japan that I don't necessarily agree with, and I wouldn't really recommend for people because these companies, they tend to hire ALTs and then they sort of hire them out to schools. But because you're working for the company and not directly for the school, the company takes a cut of your salary, which kind of means that you're working for less and you're just, paying a chunk of your salary to the company. So in that regard, I wouldn't recommend that in particular.
And you say that's becoming more prevalent?
In certain areas, yeah, like it was becoming quite prevalent in Fukuoka.
Okay.
So if you can get a deal with a school directly, I mean, that's the gold standard or the JET program. Those are both really good options, but there's a lot of companies that are, I'd say, a little bit more fair to their employees and they try and give you a good salary. So just compare, I'd say, and just shop around before you accept a contract.
I think it's so fascinating that a lot of the teachers who end up in Japan really have an interest in the culture and the country even before they go. Do you think that's something that's necessary for a teacher considering Japan?
I think it helps. Yeah. Like, I think they tell you when you go, they warn you that you might suffer from some culture shock. But that was never really like a big issue for me because I had familiarized myself with the culture so much before I went. None of it really came as a shock because like I knew like what to expect in terms of the food and the climate and the culture in general, like the business culture, the working culture. So I never really felt like I was overwhelmed by any of it. And if you can bring a little bit of language with you, I mean, that's really helpful. I went with 0 when I first started in Oita, and that was like very challenging, obviously. So if you can bring a little bit with you, it's a good idea. Good idea.
All right. Before we wrap up the interview, Luke, we have one question that we like to ask every single guest on our podcast, and that is, do you have any advice to someone thinking about teaching taking the Oxford Seminars course and then going to teach overseas? What do you say to that person who's kind of on the fence?
Well, for me, it was the adventure of a lifetime. I wouldn't trade my time overseas for anything. I hadn't really traveled much before I did this, and it was a really great way to get paid to travel, essentially, and you can save money and see the world at the same time. So I just think that it's really broadening, and it looks really good in a resume too. If you can say like I've been overseas and I worked overseas, a lot of employers will look at that really favorably. So do it while you can. If you're young and single and unattached, or even if you want to bring a partner over, I mean, that can work sometimes too. But like in your 20s and 30s, if you got a couple of years and you're willing to, adjust to a new culture, yeah, do it. I think it's a really good option for people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been great having you.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. But before we go, Alex, could you tell us a little bit more about, what you and Luke can do for graduates, helping with Japan?
Sure, yeah. As Luke mentioned, Japan is definitely one of the top teaching destinations for teaching English, both in terms of popularity among teachers and in terms of the job market there. And there's good reason for that. The salaries are great, the benefits are very competitive, and there's a really wide variety of schools and locations you can choose from. For Oxford Seminars, a lot of our contacts in Japan hire for after-school centers or aikawas. Am I saying that right, Luke?
Aikawas, yeah.
Aikawas. And they're, located in a lot of regions across Japan. So there's a lot of diversity in terms of where you can teach, as Luke mentioned. And one thing is, it does take, the application process for Japan takes a little bit longer. So typically it can take up to 6 months. So if you are thinking about teaching abroad in Japan, it's good to get started early and get your application in early, well in advance, and give yourself enough time to go through the whole process and consider all your options, because you might get a lot of great offers and you want to really choose the one that's going to be a good fit for you. So yeah, there's lots to draw teachers to Japan, and hopefully there'll be lots more opportunities in 2022 as well.
Thank you, Alex, for giving us that update. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to the Teaching Abroad pod. We'll be releasing new episodes every other Wednesday. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe and share it with your friends. Remember, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere you can find a good podcast. If you have any ideas or questions for us for an upcoming episode, please leave them in the comments on YouTube or send them to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can even email us at teachingabroadpod@oxfordseminars.com. Thank you and have a great day.